everyone, thank you so much for joining us in this beautiful California garden. And tonight we're going to talk about how we keep our children emotionally healthy. Everybody ready for that?
Oh yeah, man, we're doing the best we can.
Oh my, you all got the answers. We got like millions of people watching this and they are looking to you for hope. But first of all, you need to introduce yourselves. And let me tell you, we got some brilliant people here tonight.
Well, I guess that leads to me. I'm Stephanie Caine. I am Jason Caine's wife. I'm a mother of twins and boy-girl twins, 9 years old. And also I have a PhD in counseling. I'm licensed in therapy, as well as a professor.
So any difficult questions tonight, you got it covered.
I'll do my best. Oh, I'm an educator as well.
Yeah. I'm Jason. I'm Stephanie's #1 client. Pay all the fees to her, make sure everything happens. No, I'm a pastor at Bayside Blue Oaks, and of course, she already let you know about our kids. And we're just enjoying our time right now, trying to figure life out like everybody else.
But you got a history in counseling too.
I do. Yeah. I have a master's degree in counseling.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I do.
That's good. So she helps him, and guess what? He helps all the pastors. That's basically what happens, okay?
Yeah, we're doing that.
And I'm Casey Shortt. I'm married to one of the pastors here on staff. His name is Brannon, and I'm the only non-parent in the room. I'm the lone wolf today, but I'm so grateful to be here with all these amazing parents because I get to learn from them, and it's one of my greatest passions in life to work with and encourage parents and to work with their kids because I'm finishing up my PhD in clinical psychology and am looking forward to hopefully the rest of my career continuing to support, encourage, love on families. Yeah. So I'm just happy to be here to contribute and to learn from all of you guys.
Well, Casey, you got something to say. You've been working with kids for a while now, so I'm sure we can learn from you today.
Thanks, Jason.
A lot of brain power, and you live with Brannon as well. You get a lot of practice there.
I get a lot of clinical practice at home.
Well, I'm very fortunate to be here with all this information because I'm a longtime member of Bayside and a mother of 6. Been a volunteer at Bayside in the children's ministry for a lot of years. That's why they called me, because they know that I have 6 kids. And my name's Cynthia. Sorry, didn't say that.
Cynthia, I think we're just going to sit back and let you talk. I'm sure you can learn
so much wisdom to offer.
Let's jump right into this conversation. What is emotional health? Come on, Stephanie, you got that PhD. Launch us.
Well, I'll get started. I know Casey will come in and kind of add to that. But emotional health really gives context that emotions drives our behaviors sometimes. And so we may experience an emotion, and as a result, we act on it. And when you have emotional health, it's a way of managing your emotions. So that would be anger, fear, joy, happiness, whatever you're feeling. How do you manage it in a way where you can behave appropriately and effectively in the environment around you and the people around you? And
so tantrums aren't healthy?
No,
okay.
not healthy.
Not the most
but developmentally, it could be.
And sometimes they get kids things,
yes,
so there's a reason they do it.
Yeah.
That was said so beautifully. It's hard to even add anything to it. I think I would just continue elaborating on what Stephanie was saying by kind of breaking it down, especially for kids. If I was to break it down into 3 steps, I would think the goal for kids building emotional health is that, one, they can label their emotions. They know what they're feeling. Because that's a really simple skill that a lot of kids, it's hard for them to understand. What does anger feel like in my body? How do I recognize that when my heart is racing and my cheeks feel flushed, that's anger? And then after being able to recognize their emotion, labeling it, we want them to be able to understand what that means. And sometimes that takes calming down first, because every single emotion, God made us with emotions because they help us understand ourselves, our walk with God, and other people more. So it helps us to connect more deeply with ourselves, with God, and with others. So we want to understand them. For instance, anger, one way we would understand it is by knowing that it's often a protective emotion that covers the more vulnerable emotions like sadness or fear. And so if a kid learns to recognize when they're angry, then later on they can start understanding what made me afraid. And they can go ask for help from their parent or their caregiver, or as they get older, they can learn to pray with God about their fears. And then third, and this might be like one of the most important pieces because you have to do this before you understand them often, is to learn how to cope with your feelings, how to regulate your body, how to go from being really overwhelmed to calm. or how to just acknowledge I'm feeling so much joy right now, and for me that makes me want to share my joy with other people and connect really deeply in that way. So label, understand, cope.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sounds extremely complex, and this is what we're trying to do with our kids, right? Just help them label, cope. I mean, it's easy task.
You should actually come to our campus pastors meeting and explain that to adults.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, like we need to do this for us.
You said something there, Casey, I thought was brilliant. You said God created our emotions. I don't think the church has been great in the past of sort of dealing with that, because, you know, I think some of the churches I was raised in, it was like spiritualize everything. You know, it's if it's difficult, it's the demonic, when oftentimes it was the dynamic in life that was just going on. So recognizing that God has made us emotional, I think is really, really important for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's one of the foundational things about allowing your kids to grow up and be emotionally healthy, is recognizing that our emotions are okay. And you're raising kids, they're at different stages. We have 9-year-olds, and my son cries. And Stephanie had to remind me the other day, like, it's okay for him to cry. Let's not just tell him to stop crying. He's putting out an emotion. And so how do we help him cope, going back to what Casey was saying?
He must be a Raiders fan, is that what?
That didn't do it to him.
Yeah, I don't even know what the Raiders do, but someone told me. So we talked about helping our children cope. So you, Cynthia, you got 6 children. We got to help them cope. But not only have they got to cope, we've got to cope in COVID. So we're in a global pandemic. I called my neighbour from Belfast who moved into our street in 1926. Wow. He's 97 years old. He moved there as a boy. And he said this, he'd been through a lot. He says, I've never lived through anything like this. And he went through the First World War. He went through, not the First World War, forgive me. He went through the Second World War, was stationed in Germany, and all of that stuff. And he said, we haven't been through, our kids have never been through anything like this. Well, what's it been like in your house? Never mind, like normal, but in COVID.
It's been incredibly challenging. You know, having teenagers, all my kids are 15 to 19, my 4 youngest ones, and in high school. And when COVID came down in, you know, end of February, beginning of March, there was so much uncertainty, we didn't know. And putting your kids on lockdown when they're used to being in sports and activities and school, and just telling them everything's stopping, you know, and not being able to have a lot of words or a lot of explanation was incredibly difficult for them. But surprising when you talk about emotional healthy and resiliency. You know, my 4 youngest kids are adopted, and that is one of the things that comes out of adoption and trauma and things like that, is that level of resiliency as they move and they heal. And I think that even kids that come from intact, you know, mom and dad families still struggle with resiliency and how to navigate. And this COVID has been really challenging to build that resiliency and to make different choices for them when they're used to having a world where they can have freedom and they can move around and do, you know, what they're used to doing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And how are they doing through this time, and how are you managing? Are they managing?
Well, you know, it's really challenging because you have your norms, you know, when they're in school. I have a grandma who is used to driving them back and forth to school. She's almost 78 years old. She can't drive them back and forth to school because she can't be around them because of COVID. You know, so now your resources to support you to do life. I'm an essential worker, so I had to work. So it's like making sure that they have covering, that someone's making sure they're doing their schoolwork, making sure they're safe at home, make sure they're not killing each other, you know, being locked up in a home. So it's been challenging, but surprisingly, they exceeded my expectations and again because we're surviving. You know, we haven't fallen apart. We haven't had any real traumatic events. We've just been navigating as each thing comes up.
So let's talk about this, and maybe Jason, you get us off to a start on it as well. How do we create some stability in a world that is full of uncertainty? I mean, we're going through so much. For some children, all they're used to, like for the little tinies, they've only seen people in masks. It's sort of weird for them. How do we create some of that emotional stability?
Yeah, I think, you know, and with all the disruption that is happening, Stephanie and I early on tried to figure figure out what can we do that helps create routine, which I think is huge for kids and adults, but also some sense of normalcy, and how do we make the best out of the situation that we're in, and how do we maximize really the time that we're in. You know, as believers, I think one of the things that we have to lean on is God's word, and his word is the thing that does not change. Wow. And it's the thing that we can trust the most. And there's a scripture in Deuteronomy that talks about teaching things to our children. I think it's Deuteronomy 6:9, and writing on the doorpost of your house. So trying to normalize certain things that you can normalize. So for when school was in, we had a routine for school. On Sundays for church, we have a routine for church. We have breakfast, and we can eat at home every single meal that we have. So trying to figure out how to bring stability to the things that we have control over. So if we're inside of our houses all day long, what things can we do that are routine? Because I think that kids thrive on routine. I don't know the science behind that like the two of these may, but I do know that things in my house are a whole lot calmer when my kids have some sort of routine, and we're not just allowing the wave of the day to take us wherever it wants us to go.
And I would add to that, with balancing routine with the recognition that, yes, our lives have been restricted beyond what it's been before. However, we do have some freedom to try some new things. And if we're fortunate enough to have a home and to have the parents who are able to be home with kids just like how we are. Because I want to acknowledge that there are families out there who are just, this is a very traumatic and crisis point for them. They don't have the stability of a home. They don't have stability of employment. They either have immunocompromised kids or they themselves are immunocompromised. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there are people who are really dealing with this on a very serious level that we need to constantly think about and pray for and be active and be the hands and feet of Jesus and really try to help those people. So we got to think about the spectrum. But for those of us on the other end who are blessed to have a home and stability and internet service and resources for our children, going, okay, well, look, Jason started going on bike rides. Like, let's come up with some fun things.
Do you have
that
videos
we can
of
do.
that? Last time I saw him on bike was in Israel. And he was,
with my
that's
mom,
a long
that's
story.
right.
Yeah, but just coming up with fun things, new routines that we can add to go, wow, well, sorry, there's no more dance and there's no more basketball or baseball, but you know, hey, why don't we start using our bikes more? Why don't we start, playing outside a little bit more? So just trying to figure out ways. I know that education has really stalled out or been very different, and I take a deep breath because homeschooling was a struggle for me with kids, and I think there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that.
Absolutely.
Becoming teachers when we didn't really want to be, but that education may have changed or may seem to have stopped, but there's an education that our kids are getting now that is priceless.
Wow.
And we really have to gain perspective on that. And you really hit on that when you were talking about, Cynthia, resilience. Where else in your lifetime does your life stop so abruptly where you get an opportunity as believers in Christ to put what we've been learning about in action and teaching our children what it's like to be Christ followers in a crisis, that we can't be with everybody else screaming, yelling, having tantrums, upset, anger, lashing out, that we can actually be people who are a source of peace and light in the middle of this uncertain time, and we can actually emulate that in real time with a real situation with our children. That is an education that you cannot replicate anywhere in any time in any school. So we really should be leaning into that, maximizing that, and using that rather than resisting it and fighting it and trying to get back to something that we can't get.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So you mentioned there about parents that are right now, I mean, disruption with a capital D, they're really under pressure. How can parents, I mean, I know like my kid, youngest boy, 15, is like, he went through like the first wave, okay, and then when it all shut down again, he's going, is this life? And I'm trying to put that routine in again, and he ain't coping, he's great, but he's just going, Dad, is this it? How do parents manage to transfer their anxiety? Any thoughts on this, Casey, or any how do we manage our anxiety without doing this emotional transfer?
Man, isn't that a hard question? I mean, goodness, I'm a therapist, and I feel like even just coming home after a hard day of work, sometimes it's hard not to snap at my husband. And I don't even have children yet, so I can't imagine the degree to which our parents during COVID are feeling just the stress pressing down on their shoulders. So I think before even getting into like any management techniques, from my heart to like all of you parents, like my heart and like my prayer for you is that God gives you the ability to hold so much compassion for yourselves, to see yourselves through God's eyes of love for each of you. Because I think it's so easy to tear ourselves down for every little thing that we do, especially parents right now, because there's so much pressure on each and every parent. And there are articles out there on how to get your kid through COVID, how to help cope with anxiety, how to be the perfect stay-at-home mom who's teaching your children every single lesson. And it's just impossible to be perfect. And something I find comfort in, because I think about my future as a mother, which is yet to come, is that like all the research shows us that you actually don't have to be the perfect mom or perfect dad. There's a whole body of research out there that tells us what gives us the most healthy kids is actually, the scientific term is the good enough mother.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's God's built-in grace for parents everywhere.
That's
it's
so
amazing
good.
that our kids are so resilient. But to actually answer your question, I think one of the most helpful things to build insight around anxiety is just to notice what anxiety feels like for you, because everybody is on a different spectrum about building insight about themselves. And so one way you can do that is through like a body scan, just kind of noticing from top to bottom. Do I feel tension in my shoulders? Is my heart racing? Am I notice that my
I'm feeling very self-conscious right now. I'm just doing everything.
Am I notice that my like thoughts are coming really, really quickly, like too fast to process? Do my muscles feel really, really tense? Have I been snapping more often than usual at my kids? And those are going to be the indicators to know that your anxiety is heightened. And then some like typical good coping is going to be different for every parent. Whatever helps you relax is good coping. Notice your anxiety, practice that good coping. Some like simple tips would be deep breathing. I know like mindfulness and meditation, prayerful reading of scripture is really helpful for me. Going on walks, exercising. I'm sure each of you guys have a self-care routine, and I kind of think about coping with anxiety twofold. On the one hand, we have to cope with it in the moment, and that's when you notice it's happening in the moment. Like, I walk in, my heart's racing, I'm feeling tense, and then my husband asks me, what's for dinner? And my immediate response is like, why are you expecting me to make dinner? I'm exhausted.
Yes.
I don't want to say that. But in that moment of anxiety, I have to choose to cope in the moment, to take a deep breath, to say, babe, I got to go on a walk for a moment, and then I'll come back and re-enter that conversation. But the second piece is, how do we plan a lifestyle that's managing anxiety for the long term, where we're building in margin into our lives so that we can handle the stressors as they come? Because COVID is a time of a lot of stressors, which means if possible, and it's not possible for all families, as Stephanie said, but if possible, we need to create more space, more margin, and really commit to those healthy routines that the Caines talked about so beautifully, because that gives us kind of more space for dealing with the anxiety as it comes. So plan for the long term as well as plan for the short term.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're managing anxiety. We need good routine, but on the Enneagram, I'm a 7. I'm adventure. I need fun. Kids need fun. Come on, you've got 6 of them. Cynthia, I mean, how do we build, still in the midst of all of this routine, which is great stuff, how do we routinely put in fun? Can we still have fun in COVID? Can we do that?
Yeah, we absolutely have to. One of the things that came up when Casey was talking was connection. I think that when we can connect, and like you said, when you come home from a long day's work and work in an environment where you're having a lot of expectations of it, and you walk in the house and you have teenagers that don't have any problem being in their bedroom for many hours, you know, forcing that connection, you know, forcing those hugs and that connection, and then being playful. I mean, and really working at it as a parent. Sometimes it's not easy to be playful and to be fun, and I can be a pretty serious person, and having teenagers, when you break that ice and make that connection with them, and they bring the fun, you all of a sudden go, God, life is so much easier, even in the midst of a pandemic or COVID or uncertainty, playing games. We have an entire closet in our house of games. How often do they really come out?
Yeah.
But during this COVID thing, that has been one thing, Monopoly games for hours, teaching them to play cards, teaching them to play backgammon, because they're not doing the sports. They're not getting out of the house and being with their friends. And finding a way to connect is probably the best way to have that fun.
I love that you say that, Cynthia, because I don't remember who said this first, but someone once told me that connection and shared joy, what you're talking about, that's the glue for all learning. Like healing happens in relational homes where there is shared joy, and those moments that you're having are priceless. Also, that was the most beautiful example ever of good coping, because when you're having fun together, your brain has more dopamine and it relaxes your body. Laughing relaxes your body. It's like God's built-in medicine.
And my guess is that it brings your goal was to bring your children into it and helping them connect, but it helps you as well.
Completely.
So it helps the whole family. And so to your point, when you were talking about, just being aware of when you're anxious, what triggered that state? What situation, what event, what were you doing that triggered that? Because I think we have to look into what areas may bring us to the state of anxiety, so how we can get out of it. So I'll just be transparent and just say, like, for me, getting on social media, there's certain things that I read that it just triggers my anxiety and I get tense. And it's very easy and tempting to get sucked into that, whether it's start watching news article that leads to the next article and the next article and a video on this and that, and then reading comments and then spiraling into and then commenting, well, I just got to tell this person about what I, and comment that leads to another comment, and then next thing you know, you're spiraling in this anxious state and you're tense and you don't even realize it because you're dealing with the adrenaline rush of what's happening at the moment, and it's not healthy at all. So I think it's good to stop and ask yourself, what are those moments that really build anxiety in me, and are these moments really worth engaging in? What are they adding to my life? What are they adding to my children's lives, to my family's life? What change am I causing? I had to stop myself, and just say, wait a minute, I'm not in charge. My opinion is not going to change any major issue. All it's going to do is just drive a dialogue between people and probably bring out some negativity that's not helping at all. So why would I do that?
So good.
So really just simplifying our lives and taking out those things that really, as much as we can. And I think that, social media and stuff like that is in conversations that are not productive are a good start.
Fabulous. Cynthia, you mentioned as part of emotional health, creating the connection. Jason, what are your thoughts on how do we have connections, so often conversation? How do we have natural conversations that are totally contrived? That we know what's going on, but hopefully they don't know. Go on, give us some tips.
Man, I think finding out what your kids are interested in is a huge thing. Like if you have a kid that's not normally verbal, they don't talk much. If you strike a chord with them in a conversation, remember what caused them to start talking a lot and caused them to have some excitement or have some emotion. And then you remember that and you bring that subject up whenever you find them to be stonewalling or not having a conversation with you. So I think it's intentionally noticing. It's knowing them. It's really getting an opportunity to know your child. I think in this particular season, because we're at home with them in many cases, most people 24/7. We've spent more time with our kids in the past 6 months than we would, I would imagine, in a 3 or 4 year time span. They would be at school for 8 hours. We'd come home and be with them. But right now we're with them more than ever. This is an opportunity for us to get to know our kids and learn them. And when you find something that interests your kid, go back to that very thing. My son doesn't talk a whole lot, but he'll talk about certain things. And I don't do well with this as much as I should. But when he starts talking, I need to pause and I need to listen. I got to stop whatever I'm doing. And do I do that perfectly? Absolutely not. But it's an opportunity for me to teach him that, man, when you talk, I listen to you. And I know as they get older, and my kids aren't teenagers yet, those moments become fewer and fewer, but you have to be very attentive to your children.
So having fun's really important, routine's really important. Connection and a conversation. Is there anything else that you would go, this is like another pillar in a person's life that's formed in childhood where you'd say that slowly built, that just helps build in emotional strength and emotional stability into their lives?
I think the idea of flexibility, I think that goes hand in hand with resiliency, and just really trying to spark creativity and innovation, and I think that happens with all of those elements, with connecting and finding joy with each other, and really just finding ways of just discovering each other in very new ways. So I think that it's discovering how each person, you or your children, how you can tap into, maybe there's something that has been buried with busyness. We don't have busyness anymore, but maybe there's something that can be unearthed, that God is giving you an opportunity to unearth out of your child or out of yourself, that can spark a completely new thing. I'll give you an example. My son never knew he was into drawing at all. And all of a sudden, one day, he just came across a drawing video, and he was like, I think I'm going to try this. And he's like this incredible artist now. Like, I mean, he's drawing all of these incredible, I know I'm a mom, I'm not being biased. I'm saying, like, he's literally drawing characters that look just like characters, and people that, three-dimensional, that look like people. Would have never known if we were still going to, and there was nothing wrong with the routine of school and baseball and basketball, and that was all great, but that was something that came out that was brand new, and us really trying to continue to develop that in him.
Which is really like the discipline of hard work, right? When he first started drawing, the art did not look great, but he took time and he spent time with it every single day, and he became an artist. And I think teaching our kids that, there's a book that I read, most formative book I read as a parent, called Mindset by a lady named Carol Dweck. And she talks about something about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And it's essentially, the bottom line is that if you teach your kids a growth mindset, you teach them that hard work gives them opportunity, but hard work also allows them to get better at something. And so he took to drawing, and he just would spend hours upon hours in it, and he got better at it. And that's something that he would not have learned, that particular lesson, if it wasn't for the season that we're in right now.
That's amazing.
Fantastic. Cynthia, there's parents out there, and they're going, I want to make sure that my child is emotionally healthy. You've got 6 of them, and you're a single mom. How do you spread yourself? Because I'm a parent of 4, one's left the house, married, but I'm constantly thinking, am I doing enough? And they're all different. They're all emotionally different. How do you manage to spread yourself across, and how do you deal with guilt and shake a lot of that off?
I think you're always going to have an element of guilt of, did I do enough? Did I do it right? I mean, I have 2 adult children with grandchildren, and I just spent 5 days in Arizona with my adult daughter and her family, and left my kids home. And I'm blessed to have a great roommate and support.
Did you still have a home when you?
I did. It was perfect. Yeah,
Great.
They did. They handled everything great. But I think it being in the moment, you know, the what is dealt as you're dealing with it, because, like you said, when you're in the world of busyness, you know, you get caught up and it just happens. You got to be here at 5 o'clock. You got to be here at 7 o'clock. There's a game on Saturday. This is your schedule. And right now, that's not right. I mean, other than going to work, you know, or certain responsibilities. So it's like, okay, this is an opportunity. It was a silly example. My son last night says, Mom, I want to learn to cook. Eggs are really good for you. Will you show me how to fry an egg? He's 16 years old. You know, it's like, you think, how did he not know how to fry an egg or butter toast? And you realize how much you do for them that they should really be doing for themselves.
Come on.
And he did. And so last night, I took him through literally the steps of, do you want 1 egg or 2 eggs? And put it in the bowl. And we went through this whole process. And it was like this magical moment of him beating himself and having this meal he's proud of at 16 years old, and yet we had that time. So I think, and then acknowledging it. It's like, I use my adult children to validate me as a mom of my 4 younger children, because I do often feel like, why did God give me 4 more children? Because like, I didn't want 4 more children, you know, but why did God give me that? And then it's been such a gift. And it doesn't stop giving right now, but yet my adult children constantly, Mom, don't feel guilty. Look at us. Look at how we turned out. You know, we're okay, all is good, just keep doing what you're doing, you're a good mom, and that. So I think having the validation, whether it's for your adult children or your friends or your small group or whoever, that validation that this new norm that we're all living, you know, I don't really like the tagline, but it is. There's this new norm, and you know what? We're doing okay.
We're
doing okay.
Yeah.
That's
So good.
Something else that I'm hearing you even saying is like modeling for your children right now.
Absolutely.
We don't have to intentionally sit down at a desk, take notes. I'm gonna teach you how to be a great human being. I think what we can model for our children right now, you know, the saying is more is caught than what is taught. And so with so many crazy things going on in the world, with the racial issues that are happening and the tension that's coming, as a parent, how can I model for my kid Christ likeness?
Yeah.
How do I model gentleness? How do I model humility?
Very good.
And I think the opportunity to model those things are when I'm angry, how can I show my kid how to react? Because they are watching everything that we're doing right now, and they know what dad and mom are like when things are stressful. They know what mom and dad are like when they aren't having a great day at work, because they get to see it firsthand. And I think asking ourselves a question every morning, like, man, what do I need to model for my child? What response do I want them to have to the difficult things that are happening in life? And this is, again, we'll never have an opportunity like this again to do that, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, and just when you were talking there, it made me think of some of our best friends back in Belfast. They've got adult daughters, and they were going through that late teen, early 20 stage. And they had 4 daughters, and just one of them, she made a couple of bad life decisions, and it really at that stage broke their hearts. And they turned to one of the other daughters who at that stage was living for God, was, you know, taking the kingdom of God out there. And they spoke to her like in desperation. They were so sad. And the daughter sat her parents down. I don't know, you know, I've had that moment sometimes when your kids sit you down and talk to you. And she simply said this: Mom, Dad, you can't take all the blame for her, and you can't take all the credit for me.
That's right. That's right.
You're doing your best. You give us the same childhood, the same teaching. We gotta make our decisions. And it was like a liberating moment, you know, in their life. So parents should be encouraged. So earlier on, we were talking about how important it was to have conversations, and I wanna talk to my kids about the fun stuff. But what about tough conversations? And America's having a tough conversation right now about race and reconciliation. How do we talk to our kids about this? They're seeing the new, the social media and the news you're talking about. Steph, how do we talk to our children about this?
For us as Black parents with Black children, we had no choice. We had a conversation with them. What were they, 4 years old?
Yeah.
We didn't. That wasn't an option for us. We had to talk about race.
Can you describe that conversation?
So my children were attending a predominantly white school, Christian school, where I was working, and they were the only. No, there was one other Black kid in the class, and then they were also watching cartoons, and all of their little cartoons, nobody looked like them. And there was one particular cartoon, Peter Pan, that my son was like obsessed with. And one day he just said, I wish that I could have my hair like him. I wish that I could. And I could see him processing, and he was like, I can tell in his demeanor that he was just like sunken in. And I realized at that point the importance of him, of affirming who he is as a Black boy and giving him value and knowing that God made you Black and that it's a beautiful thing, and that the problem is not you. The problem is that there should be more cartoon characters, because quite frankly, they're not real, that look like you.
Of course.
Absolutely.
And so from that point on, Jason and I started being very intentional when we were watching shows with our children, going, well, there's nobody there that looks like you. There's nobody there that looks like your friend, your Latina friend. There's nobody that looks like that's not right.
Hey, with all this drawing, there's career.
There should be,
Right,
there should be
exactly.
more representation. And we would buy dolls, and we started painting them brown, and they loved it. And now it's become an internal dialogue for them, where now they look at shows and they go, well, I want to see shows that show other people that look like not just me, but other people. Like, Like, I don't want to just see shows that look like one set of people. I want to see, or I want to see stories about people that look like me, and they start saying that, internalizing that. So I think it's important that the things that we're thinking and the questions that we ask ourselves about race, as long as it's developmentally appropriate, it's okay to put those thoughts out there and actually verbalize them and process them with our kids. And that's
And
what
be
we've
honest,
been doing.
you know?
Be honest. Be honest with what we struggle with and what we're, and or where we land on things.
Yeah, you know, and kids have the ability to talk deeper about subjects than we realize in many cases. I realized this when I was a student pastor to middle schoolers, that they were ready for a deeper level of conversation even about the Bible than I realized. And I think the same is true with our kids, and we'll be surprised when we have an open dialogue with them and have honesty, how that helps. And as a parent, being honest and letting them know, man, I'm still trying to discover this as well.
Yeah.
I'm still learning. But creating a curiosity in your children, that is a huge thing. And we have an opportunity to do it in a world that is so dynamic and changing in so many ways right now.
What would you say to parents who are going, okay, this is a big, huge emotional moment in my child's life here that we can't avoid as a nation, and neither should we. But what about parents who just feel intimidated because they don't feel they've got the answers? They're processing themselves. Well, what did parents do when they don't feel that they're properly equipped themselves?
I can speak a little bit to that in that my adopted kids are Latino.
Yeah.
And they spent many years in foster care, and they were in a black family, been in foster care for about 7 years. And it's not my experience. I don't have a lot of experience of what they went through or any differences. And as this last 6 months have come up and we've been navigating this, I've just had to ask so many questions because I'm like, help me understand. You're right, you guys, I don't have any real life experience. It's not my reality. And I don't understand what that is. You know, I do know I can liken it in a small scale. I mean, I'm a female in a male work environment. I work with 85 men. I'm the only female there.
Wow.
So I can experience that, you know, where I understand being different or the challenges of being a female and getting paid different or being treated different or those biases. That's the sum of my differences. But asking them questions, help me understand how you see things and let's discover this together. And I'm not great at it, but it is definitely, again, it gives goosebumps. It's helped me have a little bit different perspective and I'm more empathetic and want to ask more questions of someone like yourself that just says, help me understand how I can be a better version of me and have a more understanding so that we can navigate this together and glorify God in how we act and treat one another.
I love what about what you said, Cynthia, is that you are affirming and validating their stories. And you're listening and you're taking the posture of humility and recognizing that their stories actually add to your knowledge and your growth. Rather than trying to silence them or invalidate their stories. I think that is so empowering. I can tell you as a black woman, I don't speak for all black people, but there's nothing that is life-giving to me more in that when I have a conversation with somebody who is white or who's not me, and they go, I want to hear your story, and then they just listen to it and they go, wow, that helped me learn something that I didn't learn. Because I'm telling you my experience, it's real. And that is very powerful. And we even see in the Word of God that it says, I'm going to butcher it, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that people are going to be changed by the blood of Christ, but also by our testimony.
The word of our testimony.
So basically the Bible tells us that our stories are transformative for people. So God puts our stories on a pedestal. So then there should be nobody that will discount your stories when God considers your stories as being transformative to other people. So I just want to affirm you as a mother of children of color to say that you doing that is incredible.
Yeah. The scripture is we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. The way that people come into new knowledge and come into faith is certainly because of the sacrifice of Christ, but also the testimony of other people. And as Stephanie is saying, it really, there's so much power when we sit down and talk to each other. And I get to see more of the world when I get to hear how my Irish brother lived in Ireland. I get to know more about the world when I have those experiences. So. great thing.
When you think about, like, for me, being an adoptive mom, and you think about our adoption into Christ's family.
Right.
And I know when I walked into this adoption, it wasn't, like I said, I make jokes about it, it wasn't my plan. You know, you have the plan book, it wasn't my plan book. And then when I said yes, it was like, okay, I'm going to give them a different life. You know, I can give them this life and, you know, all this stuff. And then it has been 180 this whole experience. It's been them giving me a life that is off the charts, emotionally challenging. They have rocked my world, and they do on a daily basis. There's times when I just go, wow, I really did think like I was going to make a difference in their life. And yeah, I'm sure me saying yes, and as much as I love them, because I swear I don't love them any different than I love my grown kids, and that was God. I asked him to put his love for them in my heart, and he did. But they have changed me and are continuing to change me. And I think that's, you know, I think as parents, we come into this like thinking, you know, oh, look at me, I have this to give my kids. You know, like I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to have this marriage, and have this, all this kind of stuff, and look at what I have. And it is, I don't know anyone that's a parent, it's the 180 the other way. And unfortunately, way too many people aren't open to that. They're like, you do what I say, this is what you're going to be, this is who you're going to be, this is how you're going to see it. And we miss the opportunity to go, oh, it's totally different than what I expected. Let me see their perspective. And I think one of the things that we could do through this whole COVID and this slowdown and this new normal is, God, throw away some of our thoughts and some of our preconceived notions of what it's like to be a parent or a Christian or any of that stuff. Throw it away to some degree, get in the Word, and then ask our kids, what do we need to do different? How can we be better parents? How can we better help you navigate what you're navigating? Because they're going to teach us way more than I think sometimes we can ever teach them.
Wonderful.
That's awesome.
That's powerful.
Wow, that's so good. I'm so proud to announce tonight that Cynthia is going to be one of our new campus pastors. That was on this show. Oh my, really brilliant stuff. You're even blowing bulbs out here. It's just happening all around. I'm going to ask you one question, but but don't answer it yet. I want you to think about it because it's going to be our last thing. The question I'm going to ask you at the very end is, what was the one thing when you look back at your childhood that you think that really built emotional health into my life? That parenting practice, that relationship, whatever it was, you look back and go, we're not perfect today, but if there was that one thing I look back and go, that really helped me. But and this is like a tease for next week. Let's talk about this for 1 second. We are all in a battle with this digital age, and some of us, we're not raising teenagers, we're screenagers. That's what they're, just on the screen the whole. How do we connect with kids that are so connected, you know, with the internet and with this digital age? Any thoughts on that? And we're going to cover this in depth, big time next week. But any?
Yeah, I have no idea. I'll be watching next week, though.
I'm turning to Casey.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I gotta watch that one. My thoughts off the top of my head, and this is because I realize I'm being surprised. Like today, I was sitting in a consultation meeting, hearing stories from other therapists, so I won't give the exact details, but I was surprised by the way an adolescent, a teenager, had used Snapchat in a way that had caused them harm. I didn't even know that was possible. And so coming from that experience, I think what I want to continue learning for the kids that I work with, but also what I would hope for all the families out there, is that we're just actively learning what technologies kids have access to these days. Because we can't talk with them about safety or set boundaries or have these conversations if we don't know what's in front of them all the time, if we don't know what's affecting them, if we don't know the apps and what are all the parts of the apps and what's infiltrating technology with kids. Because now I think it's more complex than ever. So I think a part of it is just learning, getting in there and learning. And I know that I have learning to do. I feel like I'm behind in my generation.
Yeah, seriously, I'll be tuning in next week because I have no idea. I mean, I set boundaries around the amount of screen time that my kids have as best I can. COVID has increased what my limits are. But I think all of us are trying to figure it out together. And I think remaining curious is the number one key.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that education kind of changed that, with us going into COVID and kids having to be on the screen more. That's where they get their school lessons and
Yes.
things like that. And so they're having to engage more with that. So when you add that along with whatever their typical routine was with being on the screen, you may have even doubled the hours in the day on that. So one of the things that have been convicting for me is looking at how much time I spend on the screen, and that it's so compulsive that I don't even know that I'm doing it.
Me too.
And then what is it that the phone has this like app where it tells you like,
Yeah.
oh,
Oof,
you've
scary.
used this much time. There's nothing more convicting. You check yourself.
You're
How many
10%
hours
higher than last week.
Yes. But then even when you look at the numbers, like how many hours
Yes.
you spent on there, it's like, oh my gosh. So before we look at kids and go, you're doing too much, sometimes we got to look inward and go, oh, maybe we're teaching this in our behavior. Maybe we're looking down at our screen and they're figuring they've got to do that too. So.
Yeah, Kurt was actually saying this to me, that Kelly had spoken to him and said, could you do your devotions with a real Bible
Yeah.
and not with a phone? And it's simply because it looks like, it just helps the whole family see Dad's not on his phone while he's clearly reading scripture. But I just thought that was really, really smart, really smart. So then next week we're going to dive right into this and trying to help parents in this digital age and get a breakthrough. So back to that question I asked earlier on, what is the one thing you'd look back on and go, my goodness, if I could replicate this in my parenting and put this into my child's life, this would be it?
I'm going to connect two stories real quick. I'm a first-generation American. My parents are from Haiti, and they came to America a few years before I was born. So they didn't speak. They were learning English while working, while, raising kids. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and looking at my room, because the desk for the house was in my room, and seeing my mom, because she was in culinary art school, with a book and a huge English or French to English dictionary next to her. And I remember night after night, it would be late because I would just wake up and then I'd turn around again and then she'd still be on there and she'd be looking at the book and writing and studying. And then when she finally graduated, she got the top of her class. And that always resonated with me, like, wow, Mom did this while learning English. And at the top of class. And then fast forward, when I was looking for graduate school, looking to get my master's, this was years ago, and I got in and I was like, Ma, I got in, but how am I gonna work on my master's? I work full time, and then, I'm doing this work over here. And she kind of like had this coming, she was just like, get a grip. Like, this is what life is. You work hard, and you're going to make it work. Do you want to get your master's? Yeah. Do you want to pay your bills? Do you want to work? Yeah. Then do it. And it was, it sounds harsh, but it was like what I needed to just go, like, everybody doesn't always need, like, it's going to be okay, you've got hope. Sometimes you need to just go, like, wake up, grow up, and handle it. Like, this is the situation. No, it's not easy, but just do it. And that has stuck with me. I mean, as a child and adult throughout my whole life.
Wow.
So,
I think one of the most valuable things a parent can give their child is confidence. And so growing up, I can remember playing sports or whatever. My dad's always at the games, and not just at the games, but the obnoxious parent that's rooting like crazy. And not worrying about embarrassing himself. He just wants his boy to know that, man, I'm rooting for you. And I'm fortunate where my entire life, whatever I've done, my parents have rooted for me. And I would say that I have a good measure of confidence based upon what my parents instilled in me. So I think to give me that confidence is definitely my parents being fans of mine in a healthy way.
Yes.
And being honest when I wasn't doing well. So I think for me, that's the stories that I can remember.
And I can speak into that as well. We were on the in Capernaum in Israel, and he gave a stunning devotion there. And your mom was there as well. And everyone enjoyed it, but your mom really enjoyed it. She was like a cheerleader that
for
day.
sure.
It was beautiful to watch. That's the thing. I can't remember anything you said, but she was Casey?
So I think for me, my answer is twofold. One, I really believe that the most foundational, important piece of a person's emerging identity is to know that they are loved, to know that they are a person who is worthy of love. It will affect everything they do. It'll affect the way they relate to God, the way they think about themselves, the way they interact in relationships in the future. And that's one thing I will always thank my parents for. Even amidst an imperfect home at times, I can honestly say my parents were like, every single day telling me I was loved. Before I went to bed every night, like my dad would always in the day saying that he loved me and giving me a hug. And that buffered so many problems that occurred along the way. Our family wasn't perfect. But that love, that foundation of knowing that I am worthy of love as a child, changed the friends that I chose. It changed who I thought I could date and who I wouldn't date because I knew how I deserved to be treated. It changed how I believed in my ability to do things because my family believed in me. And that foundation of love, that warmth, that care, and just the declaration of I love you every single day to the point where I just kind of ignored it was so important. I felt like I was just kind of drowned in those words of I love you to the point where I couldn't walk away without it touching me. And that was really powerful. And then second, something I learned in my family from a really young age is my dad told me that the values that he instilled in us would help us make decisions in the future. And that's just the simple way he put it. And the way he described that was he taught us Bible verses that we would memorize as we were kids. And now as an adult, I can reflect on that and really see the deep meaning and purpose because we're in a storm right now. Like this is a storm. It is a pandemic. Nothing is as it should be. And I find for me that those values are like the lighthouse in my storm, keeping me from crashing on the rocks. Like when I have trouble making a decision or figuring out like, how do I practice self-care today? How do I talk to myself? How do I talk to my husband? How do I make a decision about my time or my career? I return back to my values that are instilled in the Word of God and in the kingdom of God. And that becomes my lighthouse in the storm. And so I'm grateful for that. The love and the values.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love what you said because as you think through your childhood and you go, it wasn't perfect. Yet I'm the youngest of 6 kids, so I know what that's like. And that has been the core for me is I look back and I think I have my 5 siblings. My parents, again, always loved us through the storms. And that family connection and that well you can always go to, to know that your family's there for you and they're going to, tell you hard things when you need to hear hard things or encourage you or cry with you. And I want to be that. And I do my best to be that for my kids too. So yeah, going back to that was a good memory to look back at.
Wonderful, wonderful. For me, it was pretty much what Jason said there as well. I can remember sports. It was soccer, and I was an enthusiastic player. I was never going to play in the English Premier League, but I always remember anytime I would look over to the side, my dad would always turn up at the game. Would always be at the side of the field, and I remember, and I knew this as a kid. I'm not going to go professional, but I always thought that his presence wasn't there because of my performance. It was just because I was playing. Just that I was in the game. And I can't really remember a game he didn't turn up to, and that's not guilt in any other parent who can't do your best to get at it. But, when I look back on it, I think to myself, probably my dad thought he was being a good dad, but I remember him as a great dad. And I think it's something what you said earlier on, and saying to all the parents out there and trying to build emotionally healthy children, is just keep at it. Don't try and be great. Just be good. Just do your best. Just be a good parent, and they'll remember you as a great parent. Everyone, thank you so much. This has been great. I could sit here all night. Look at this. This is so relaxing. The content's been great. You guys have been awesome. And make sure to watch next week, won't you, as well?
We certainly will.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pumped.
Those digital tips that really get us through. Hey, God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Yep, God bless.
Thank you.